Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how I created some slab built feet for my cloud bonsai pot, along with two techniques for creating drainage holes. Tools I've got here are some water, my rib tool, finishing sponge, my surgical blade or sharp X-Acto works very well, along with my needle tool and a pony roller. So I've got a slab that I've already had sitting out for a little while, and I am going to compress the clay by using my rib tool, just like we did with our other slabs for the cloud bonsai pot in the first video. We want to compress in two directions, and make sure you're cleaning your rib tool as you go. Next, to create the shape of my feet, I knew I kind of wanted them to look like clouds, and I'm just making these freehand. When you're creating feet freehand, always remember you're going to probably make a couple adjustments. I'm using it's about 3 inches of a line to create this kind of pea pod shape that's going to be stretched out to create my kind of cloud feet that I want to make. So it's a 3-inch line that I'm using to kind of section off and create my shape, and now I'm just going to cut it out with my X-Acto tool, and this piece will now be used as a template for my other 2 feet, so I can make them all relatively similar. See, this is a thicker slab. I haven't thinned it out yet, which is partially why I've made such a fat little pea pod. My finished foot is going to be wider and larger, but when I'm cutting it right now it seems very small, but it's going to get stretched out. And so I'm just using that as my template for my other 2, and I'm first tracing with my needle tool before I cut them out completely. That way I don't accidentally cut into my template piece. If you want to workshop these more, you can always trace onto a piece of paper and play around with some paper templates before cutting into your clay. Next, I'm going to flatten these guys out and start shaping them. I'm first going to use my pony roller. This is just a handheld rolling pin, a single-handed rolling pin kind of, and it's nice for working with small areas that you want to flatten out or hide seams. And in this case I'm using it to help stretch out my little cloud foot here in each direction. And so that's changed the shape a little bit, and then I'm going to smooth the edges. I'd like to have like a beveled edge for my foot so it comes to a point rather than having a straight edge from that you get from cutting it. So I'm just using my finishing sponge with a little bit of water. It's not soaking wet because I don't want it to get too soft. Once I'm happy with my edges, I'm going to pick it up and hold it in my non-dominant hand, and then I'm going to use my dominant hand to start pushing into my cloud and making kind of pockets. So I'm pushing in the very, very middle to kind of bring the edges closer and closer together, so I create kind of like a little bridge, or I don't know what to call it, a dome. But I'm pushing inwards to create space in the middle of each of these kind of pea pod shape areas, and I'm just adjusting as I go. You might get some cracks here and there, and just smooth them out as you go, and just be careful as you're pushing the clay. If you need to add a little bit of water, that's alright. and then I'm just shaping it. I want these to be curved. There's 3 of them, and I kind of want them to match the curve of my pot. So I've got them at a slight arch. And remember to use your tools. I'm just using my sponge and my rib tool to kind of smooth out some cracks that have occurred. And then just take your time to futz with these each a little bit. I'm also going to try and make it as level as possible so it's not teetering on any side too much. And then I'm also going to flatten out the top a little bit where I know it's going to attach to my pot, using my rib tool to flatten out the surface where it will attach to my pot. Next, to make our drainage holes, I've got my needle tool, I've got a little loop tool, comes with most of your clay kits. I've also got a drill and 2-size drill bits. We have this in the studio, which you can use as long as you're wearing gloves, and something that you can do at home as well if you're working on your pottery at home. And the drill is just a really nice way to get some holes quickly. Especially if you've got something that needs a lot of holes, a drill will be indispensable. But first I need to get this upside down. It has been sitting for at least a week in between, so it has firmed up enough that I can flip it upside down and it won't affect the shape. You can do this by using another wear board, and you take the 2 wear boards and sandwich your pot in between. And then you very carefully have one hand on the bottom and one hand on the top and flip it. So now your top is on the bottom and your bottom is on the top. Get a buddy if you need help to do this. But I'm just going to clean up the bottom a little bit. Got my rib tool. And now before drilling my holes, I just want to see how my feet are going to fit on here. And I'm just going to lay them out and use my needle tool to trace a little mark on either side of where they're going to attach. This is going to save the spot for when I bring them back, and it's also going to be my space that I'm going to score for the attachment. Next, I'm going to use my drill bit, which has a larger bit on there. And if your clay is too soft, this is not going to work. You're just going to have squished clay everywhere, so it needs to be at the right dryness. And in a lot of pots that I've seen online, they have 2 big holes and then a couple smaller holes in the bonsai pot. So I decided I'd make 2 big holes with my drill. And then if you don't feel like using the drill and you want to just make each hole with your loop tool, that's fine. I usually go in by kind of using it like a screw and twisting it at an angle, and this will give you a fairly symmetrical hole. It will just take a moment longer than the drill. After you've cleaned everything up, you can go ahead and start attaching our feet. I'm using my serrated rib tool to scratch in those marks that I already made where I knew I wanted to attach my feet, and I'll scratch the little flat surface I created on my feet And then I'm going to just use some water as my slip to attach. And I'm making sure to do some extra scratching since these are on the drier side of leather hard. And I'll use my water for my slip, and I always give a really good wiggle to make sure all those little score marks are blending in together and hanging on real tight. After they're all attached, I'm just going to use my little wipeout tool to smooth all my connections. This is also just going to kind of compress those seams. While I'm at it, I'm just going to clean up any other little blemishes I see on the feet that I'm not happy with. And I'll have to leave these to set up for a little bit, but before I leave them to fire, it's always a good idea to place a board on top of whatever feet you're making, especially when you're attaching them upside down, and to check and see if they are level. If your board is leaning to any one side more than the other, you can add a little pressure, and that should help adjust the way your foot is sitting. One last step before placing my piece in for its first firing, the bisque firing, is of course I'm going to clean up all my drainage holes that I made, so from the inside, so there's no little boogers hanging off of them. And then I'm going to use some of this white decorating slip to paint on the outside of my cloud. This is an optional step. I'm using this chocolate brown clay, and I wanted to have a high contrasting white cloud outside for the piece. And so instead of using underglazes, I use the white decorating slip, which this slip needs to be applied in the greenware stage, so before any firing has happened, because otherwise it will flake off of an already fired pot if you try to place it on a bisqued pot. I put on a total of about 3 coats all over, and making sure the previous coat is dry before putting on the next coat, because if you're placing more wet slip on top of the wet slip, it just tends to push it around and you end up with some odd little bald spots here and there. And even 3 layers wasn't enough to make it completely opaque, again because I'm working on such a dark clay. The oxides from that base clay is really going to push through the white. That's all for this video. In the next one, I will show you guys how I made a water tray to go along with this bonsai pot and let you know what kind of glazes I used. Thanks for watching.